Yevamos, okay. The uncircumcised and all those who are tamei may not eat truma, but their wives and slaves may eat truma. One with multiple testicles and one who has a phallus was severed, and they and their slaves may eat, but their wives may not eat. However, if he did not cohabitate with her after his testicles were mutilated or his phallus was severed, she may eat. Who is considered someone with mutilated testicles? Anyone whose testicles were cut, even if only one of them. And who is considered a person whose phallus was severed? Anyone whose phallus was cut off. However, if even a hairbreadth of the corona remained, he is fit. Persons with mutilated testicles or a severed phallus are permitted to marry a convert or emancipated slave woman, and they are forbidden only to enter into the congregation, as it is stated. A person with mutilated testicles or severed phallus may not enter the congregation of God.
Incidentally, those are exactly the people that the Kohen is asked to marry. So I wonder if you have a Kohen who's a Tzedakah, if he's allowed to marry the Dioris or the Mishna now, if he becomes the Vadai Tzedakah. It doesn't say anything like that. And I would probably guess not, because you're dealing with the Araisa, unless there's like a clear heter that in the Torah that he's allowed to. Okay.
The Ammonite and the Moabite are prohibited from marrying into the congregation, and the prohibition is perpetual. However, their women are permitted immediately. The Egyptian and the Edomite are prohibited from marrying into the congregation only until 3 generations, both males and females. Reb Shimon permits the females immediately, and Reb Shimon said this matter is subject to our reasoning. If in the case where the males were prohibited perpetually, the females were permitted immediately, then how much more so in the case where the males were prohibited only until 3 generations, that the females would be permitted immediately? They replied to him, if this is a precept handing down, we will accept it. But if it is a ruling, there is a rebuttal to it. He said to them, not so. What I say is a precept. Mazarim, I can't write the Mazarim, I know Mazarim and Nisanites are prohibited from marrying into the congregation, and the prohibition is perpetual, both male and female.
Just to dive back into the argument that they were having about the Ammoni or Moabi, so it's only male Ammonites and Moabites who are asked to marry into the central congregation, but the women are allowed, which is why Ruth was allowed to marry Boaz. Okay. Right. Now, then comes the question of the Mitzri and the Edomi. If you have an Egyptian, so they have only 3 generations. So the machlokes that they're having is what about the women? Are the women included in those 3 generations? Okay, so Rabbi Shimon says it's a kal v'chomer. If the Ammonites, who's forbidden forever, is the women are permitted immediately. So surely the Mitzri and the Edomi are also. It's a more make-kill prohibition, and the Chachamim say that's not very good. It's not a very good kal v'chomer, because we have a limud. Why? Because it's talking about because the reason is given because they didn't come out to you to give you food and water and whatever when you came out of Mitzrayim. Okay, but that's something that's specific to the men. It's the derech of the men to go out, not the derech of the women. So why so we don't hold it against the women? But what's the thing about the Edomi and the Mitzri? There's no such svara there. So therefore we should still ask for the women. And Rabbi Shimon says, well, actually, he says, actually, what I have is a Masorah. It's not a logic. It's not a logical thing. I have a logic that supports it, which is why he brings it. But he says, I'm saying in Masorah. But nonetheless, the halacha is not like him, and the women, the female Edomites and Mitzrim are also prohibited to marry into the central congregation, which means that they're allowed to marry the people on the fringes, the Gerim, Avadim, Shafraim, and they're also allowed to marry Mamzerim.
Okay, all right.
The only thing with Mamzerim, of course, is that the Mamzer is a much worse psul because it never goes away. So if they want to have their grandchildren able to marry into the central congregation, then they've got to marry Gerim. Okay. Amar Rabbi Yeshua Shamati she'asar is choletz v'chol tzin leishto. Hasaris lo choletz v'lo choltzin leishto. Says I've got two conflicting masoras over here. Says Rabbi Yeshua. By the way, this often happens with Rabbi Yeshua somehow. That it's often the same constellation of people where Rabbi Yeshua will come and say, I have a Masorah which is confusing and I don't know how to answer it. And Rabbi Akiva will come and say, I can answer it. Okay. All right. So he's got two conflicting Masorahs about a saris. A saris is somebody who has been castrated. Okay. And or he's otherwise infertile. So how do we explain this? Amar Rabbi Akiva, ani aparish. Got it. Saris Adam choletz v'choltzin leishto. So if you have somebody who was castrated by a person or during his lifetime, in other words, he was normal and then an accident happened and he became infertile. Okay. Saris Adam choletz v'choltzin leishto mipnei shehaiselo shas hakosher, because at one time he was fit to marry and therefore it was a kosher marriage and everything was fine, but now or even if he is the Yavam, then he is allowed to do chalitza because he had a state of once being allowed to marry. Okay, saris chama, however, saris chama, it's a somebody who's castrated by the sun, which means that the first time that he came into the world, he was born infertile. So in other words, the sun never shone on him at a time when he was fertile. Okay, he cannot submit to chalitza, and you don't do chalitza with his wife. He's out of the parsha, and as a matter of fact, if he is the last surviving brother, then the widow goes free, because he's not in the parsha of Yevamos.
Right.
He's ineligible. It's as if it's an erva to her. Okay, so therefore he can't do chalitza, he can't submit to chalitza, and if he was married, then his wife does not require chalitza.
So
Rabbi Eliezer Omer Loki, he says you got it verkehrt, Punkt verkehrt. It's the other way around. The one who was born infertile, he does chalitza v'choltzin ishto, and you can do chalitza to his wife. Because we have medical procedures. Even in the time of the Mishna, apparently there was some sort of medical, or he claims at least that there's a medical remedy for the Sris Chama. Okay, so therefore he is in the parasha of Yevamos. Sris Adam lo choletz v'lo choltzin ishto mipnei she'en lo refuah. But the one who was actually physically castrated in his lifetime, he has no remedy. He's done. And therefore, he's out of the parasha of Yevamos. Okay. Now, so what? Hey, Rabbi Yeshua ben Beseira al ben Megusasta. He says there was a case. Shehaya b'Yerushalayim Sris Adam. There was a certain person who was a Sris Adam. He had been fertile at some point in his life, but became a Sris later. But Yevamos is Ishto, and his brother did Yevamos with his wife. Lekayem divrei Rabbi Akiva, and that's a support to the words of Rabbi Akiva, and this is the halacha that Rabbi Akiva, like Rabbi Akiva, not like Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, all good?
okay, that's okay.
Okay. Mishna hey, hasaris lo choletz v'lo miyabem. So as we just learned, the saris doesn't do chalitza, doesn't do yibum. This is of course this is of course talking about the Saris Chama, one who was born infertile. And similarly, the woman who is an Ailonis, who never shows signs of puberty, she does not submit to Chalitza, and she does not submit to Yevamos. She does not do Chalitza, and she does not submit to Yevamos, right? Because she's not. If the marriage to an Ailonis is actually, I wonder. That's an interesting question. I just need to reread the commentary on this. Before Asher Teiled, right? Oh, right. It's not that the marriage is not binding. It's just that the psukim explicitly state that she's got to be capable of giving birth. There's no point to Yibum if she is physically incapable of giving birth. So while it was a kosher marriage, it's a binding marriage, and if she had relations with another man, that would be adultery. But because she's out of the parsha of Yibum, being infertile, she's out of the parsha of Yibum, and therefore she doesn't do chalitza, she doesn't get Yibum, she goes free straight away. Asaris shechalatz Yibum to. Now what happens if you have a saris? He does chalitza on his Yevama. This is again the Saris Chama, the one who's not in the parsha. So not the case of like Ben Megusas, sorry. Okay, it's talking about a guy who's completely out the parsha of Yibum. He does chalitza with his Yevama. Lo pesala. He has not invalidated her to the kohuna. Right? So let's say he's the only surviving brother, and he says, let me just do a chalitza on her to be safe. No, is she a chalutza? No, she's not a chalutza, because the saris is completely out the parsha, and his chalitza is a meaningless act. It's as if he went and did chalitza to some woman in the shul. Okay, Ba'ala, however, if he has relations with her, if he decides that he's going to do yibum with her, he has made her now pasul, because this is now be'ilas zunus. She's Eishes Ach Shelo b'makom mitzvah, and therefore now she's had an asur relationship with her brother-in-law, and now that makes her pasul to the kohuna. The same thing goes for an ailonis, the infertile woman. And one of the brothers did chalitza with her. Lo pesaluha. She's allowed to marry a kohen. Remember, we had this discussion about the ailonis and the kohen. Is he allowed to marry her or not? Is he not? And I think it was Rabbi Yehuda said that this is she's called a zona, but everyone else said no, that's not a zona. As long as he's got another wife, he's allowed to. He's allowed to marry her, just like any other Israel. Ba'aluha, but if one of them had relations with her for Yibum, Bisaluha. Now that again is an asur relationship that she's having, and now she's asur to marry a kohen with Neisha be'ilasa be'ilasinus. Okay, Mishna Vav. Saris Chama Kohen. Now what happens if you have a Kohen who is born infertile? So now if he goes and marries a Bas Yisrael, so is she allowed to eat truma? So first of all, the Saris Chama is not allowed to marry a Bas Yisrael. Okay, because he's Shibu Kasher. Hold on, Saris Chama. Oh no, I beg your pardon. Saris Chama. Yes, wait. Even though he cannot give birth, who kasher lavo bakahal. A saris chama. Oh, wait, sorry, beg your pardon. We're talking about a saris, not talking about a petzua daka. This is somebody, a kohen who's simply infertile. Okay, it's not that he's not called the petzua daka. He's not called a kus shofcha. So he is allowed to marry a Bas Yisrael. Yes, you with me?
An androgynous Kohen who married the daughter of Israel.
No. We're not into the androgynous yet.
All right, because I couldn't understand why.
We're at the beginning of the Mishnah talking about an infertile Kohen.
Okay, I saw that and I said, wait, I didn't think a Kohen could marry an androgynous Kohen could marry a daughter of Israel. Anyway,
okay.
All right,
so the first thing is that he's is machila b'truma. So because even though he himself is infertile, his wife is allowed to eat truma now, because it's a mutar marriage. So therefore, she's a valid kohen. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon Omrim. So now we have another case over here. We're an androgynous kohen. So now you have a hermaphrodite kohen. Shenasa b'Bas Yisrael. So he marries an Israelite girl. Ma'achina b'truma. So this is an interesting thing, because Rabbi Yossi, actually, if you cast your mind back to the end of Bikurim, where we're talking about the dinim of the hermaphrodite, Rabbi Yossi is the one who says that an androgynous is a min bifnei atzmo, right? A non-binary gender, the real thing. So that's there's a makor for a non-binary gender in the Torah. in the Mishna at least, where Rabbi Yossi says that Chachamim couldn't establish what he is, and therefore Rabbi Yossi apparently recanted this view. He changed his mind about this particular thing and says so even if he himself is a kohen and he can eat truma, but he cannot permit his wife to eat truma because it's not clear whether he's male, female. Is this a binding marriage? Is she going to is she now permitted to eat this truma? So the most remarkable thing of this is Rabbi Shimon, who says yes, it actually does permit her to eat truma. Now, nobody else seems to say that. And the halacha is like not like Rabbi Shimon. Let's just say that a hermaphrodite kohen does not permit his wife to eat truma. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, tumtum shenikra v'nimtza zachar. Now tumtum is a different case. That's the case of a person whose sexual organs are not visible. Can't tell male, female, whatever, and they cut open the gonads or whatever and found a male member in there. And so it turns out that he's got a male organ inside there. So he, now let's say he's now the surviving brother of a Yibum case. He's ineligible for the Chalit because he's like a Saris. He's infertile, so he's out the parsha. Okay, and that is and that is not the halacha, says Kahati. So that's interesting. So it turns out that he can do chalitza. Turns out that he can do chalitza apparently, according to halacha. So back to the case of the androgynous, the hermaphrodite, who's got both male and female organs. I think we have spoken about this before in Bikurim, but here's the halacha. Androgynous nose aval lo nisa. He has to act mostly like a male, right? In other words, he is allowed to take a wife. Okay, but he may not act as a female because the Torah puts an issur on male homosexual relations. There's no issur in the Torah on female homosexual relations. So if it turns out that he's really a she, and he's living with a woman, okay, so he's living with a woman. There's no particular issur. But for a man to live with his hermaphrodite would be asur. Okay. Rabbi Eliezer Omer androgynous chayvim alav skila kezachar. And he says that if a male has relations with a hermaphrodite, their chayiv skila, it's a vadai chayiv skila. That's a misa bidei adam, that for having homosexual relations basically. And the Gemara clarifies that this is only if he has relations with the hermaphrodite, the way in a homosexual way. But if he uses the hermaphrodite's female parts, then they're patur. That's not considered. That's not chayiv. That's not chayiv skila.
I imagine this didn't happen so often. Like you say, sometimes they're just giving examples of what would be.
And androgyny is it is, I don't know how common it is, but it happens. And there's some very prominent people who are hermaphrodites. I think I've brought this up before. There's this South African athlete by the name of Caster Semenya, who identifies as a woman. But there were lots of complaints raised in the change rooms when other ladies looked at her in the shower and said, "That's not a woman," but she's actually a hermaphrodite, and it was a very a very humiliating thing for her, because at one point she was like stripped of the medals and whatever, and then they had to work out what to do with her, eventually they ruled that she was allowed to compete as a woman because she identified as a woman. I think that was really now that I think about it, that's really the precursor to all this nonsense that's been happening with the swimmers and and whatever that's happening now, is where you have actual full-on biological males who are coming and saying, "But I feel like a girl," so they go and compete against the other women. So there I kind of have a little more sympathy with Costa Semenya than I do with Leo, whatever his name is. But that's
It must be very
a real thing. It's a real physical thing now. And if Costa Semenya had to come to Chachamim and say, "What should I do?" they should say, "Listen, if you want to get married, you should get married to a woman."
It's a very hard thing. I imagine it's very hard for the people. Very difficult what they have to go through. And now, but I don't understand. It's a new world, because now we have little kids, 5, 6, 7 years old, identifying as a male or a female.
We're seeing, I don't know, we're seeing America sort of self-distracting. The whole Western world is kind of going through this end of the Roman Empire kind of stage.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. It's like Yevamos. Yevamos. If 4 brothers were married to 4 women and then died, if the eldest of them wished to perform Yibum with all of them, he may do so. If someone was married to 2 women and then died, conjugal relations or chalitza with one of them releases her co-wife. If one was qualified and one was disqualified, if he is going to perform chalitza, he should do so with the disqualified one. But if he is going to perform Yibum, he may do so with the qualified one. If one remarries his divorced wife, or remarries his chalitza, or the relative of his chalitza, he must send her away, and the child of that union is a mamzer. These are the words of Rabbi Akiva. The Chachamim, however, say the child is not a mamzer, but they admit that he marries the relative of his divorced wife. She is a mamzer. Okay. Who is a mamzer? The child of any blood relation with whom cohabitation is prohibited by a negative commandment. These are the words of Rabbi Akiva. Reb Shimon HaTimni says, the child of anyone for whom punishment is charas at the hands of heaven, and the halakha follows his view. Reb Yeshua says, the child of anyone for whom the punishment is death at the hands of the court. Reb Shimon ben Azai said, I found a genealogical scroll in Yerushalayim, of which was written, so-and-so is a mamzer from a married woman, according to Rabbi Yeshua's words. One whose wife died is permitted to marry her sister. If he divorced her and she died, he is permitted to marry her sister. If she married someone else and she died, he is permitted to perform marry her sister. If his Yevamos died, he is permitted to marry her sister, but he performed chalitza with her and she died, he is permitted to marry her sister. You know Steve Sperber?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I heard he went to Poland and Ukraine to help the people there. I just Danny Simon told me yesterday.
Yeah. Well, look up to him.
Yeah, big. So I said to my wife, maybe I should try to do something like that. I can go with Tzvi. She says, listen, you're over 75. There's a limit, there's just a limit. You can't do this. We're not having a baby. Just the things, give it up, On Rosh Chodesh and on Kol HaMoed, 4 people read the Torah that we may not do not decrease them nor add to them. And we do not conclude the reading of the section from the Nevi'im. The one who commences and the one who concludes the reading of the Torah respectively recite the blessings said before it and after it. This is the general rule. On any day on which where there is a Musaf, but which was not a festival, 4 people read the Torah. On festivals, 5 people read the Torah. On 6 people read, and on the Sabbath, 7 people read. We may not decrease them, but we may increase them. And we conclude the reading of the section from the prophets, and one who commences and the one who concludes the reading of the Torah respectively recites the blessings said before and after it. We may not divide the Shema, no go before the ark. Nor may the Kohanim lift their hands to recite the priestly blessing, and nor do we recite read publicly from the Torah, nor do we conclude with a section from the prophets, nor do we make standing and sitting tributes at the funeral, nor do we say the mourner's blessing, nor the consolation to the mourners, nor our wedding blessings are recited, nor is God's name mentioned in the invitation to the great festival meals in the presence of fewer than 10 men. In the appraisal of lands, 9 men and a Kohen are required, and the appraisal of a union is the same. One who reads the Torah may not read fewer than 3 verses. He may not read more than 1 verse at a time for the translator. And in the section from the prophets, he may not read more than 3 verses at a time. And if the 3 verses are 3 paragraphs, we may read them one by one. One is permitted to skip reading of the prophets, and one may not skip in the reading of the Torah. How much is one permitted to skip? No more than what would cause the translator to pause.
Stalin.
We had a young lady. Excuse me?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I was saying we had a young lady here, one of my granddaughter's roommate. So she was telling me she's completely Ashkenaz. The whole family is completely Ashkenaz. And her father's the Rav of a Sephardic shul. So I said, how does that go over? She said, well, it's interesting. This job was open and the other rabbi was leaving and he recommended this rabbi. And he said, I'll give it a try, There were 13 collection chests, 13 tables, and 13 prostrations in the temple. Members of Rabbi Gamil's family and of Rabbi Kananian's family would prostrate themselves 14 times. And where was the extra prostration? Opposite the wood chamber, for they had a tradition for their ancestors that the ark was hidden there. It once happened that a Kohen who was occupied at his task noticed that a certain stone of the floor was different from the others. He came to tell his colleague, but before he had concluded the matter, his soul departed from him, and they knew with certainty that the ark had been hidden there. And where did they prostrate themselves these 13 times? 4 in the north, 4 in the south, 3 in the east, and 2 in the west, opposite the 13 gates. The southern gates adjacent to the west, the upper gate, the kindling gate, the firstlings gate, the water gate. And why was it called the water gate? Because through it they would bring the flagon of water for the libation on Sukkot. So Eliezer ben Yaakov says, through it the waters trickle and they are destined to issue forth from the threshold of the temple. Opposite these southern gates are the north, adjacent to the west, Yechanya's gate, the offering gate, the women's gate, the music gate. And why was it called Yechanya's gate? Because through it King Yechanya went to his exile. In the east, Nicanor's gate, which had two wickets, one to the right and one to the left, and 2 gates in the west, which were unnamed. Okay. Ad Khan? Okay. We have this have up. These are the implements which a craftsman may not sell in the 7th year: a plow and all its equipment, a yoke and a winnow, and a mattock. But one may sell a hand sickle, a sieve, a scythe, and a cart, and all of its equipment. This is the principle. Anything that serves exclusively for transgression is forbidden, for the prohibited and the permitted is allowed. The potter may sell 5 oil jars and 15 wine jars, and for this the usual amount one collects from ownerless property. If he brought more than this, it is permitted, and he may sell to a non-Jew in Eretz Yisrael and to a Jew outside Eretz Yisrael. Beit Shammai says one may not sell him a plowing cow in the 7th year, but Beit Hillel permits because he can slaughter it. One may sell him produce even at sowing time, and he may lend him his saw, measure through it. Measure through it. He knows that he has a threshing floor, and he may change money for him, though he knows that he has workers. But if expressly, all are forbidden.
Well, that's the principle of don't ask, don't tell. If it's ambiguous, right, you don't have to stick your nose into his business. But if he tells you, I need to do this, and it's an avera, then you can't help him with it. Okay.
Regarding the bases of utensils and their rims and their ears and the handles of utensils that can receive upon which liquids fell, one dries them and they are tahor. But regarding all other utensils, they cannot perform pomegranates. They cannot hold pomegranates, which do not have an exterior and an interior, upon which part of a liquid fell, all of which is tameh. Regarding a utensil whose exterior was rendered tummy by liquids, its exterior is tummy, but its interior, its rims, its ears, and its handles are tahor. If it is interior, it became tummy. All of it is tummy. And all utensils have an exterior and an exterior. That's wrong. All utensils have an exterior and an interior, and they have a tzvaya place. Reb Tarfon says it was with regard to a large wooden trowel. And Reb Akiva says it was said in regard to cups. Reb Meir says it was in regard to tummy hands, the tahor hands. Reb Yoshi said the stages stated that ruling only with regard to tahor hands. How? If one's hands were tahor and the exterior of the cup was tummy, if he held it by its tummy place, he need not be concerned that perhaps his hand would render tummy by perhaps the exterior of the cup. If one was drinking from a cup whose exterior was tummy, he must not be concerned that the principle of liquid in the mouth was rendered tummy by the exteriors of the cup, and then rendered tummy may remain to be tummy the interior of the cup regarding a kettle that is boiling water. One may not be concerned that perhaps liquid left it, touched its exterior, and then returned to its inside. Utensils of that's it. And we have Shavuos. Shavuos, we have hay. The law applies both to matters pertaining to himself as well as to matters pertaining and to both matters of substance and matters lacking substance. How so? If he said, I will swear that I will give someone to so-and-so, or that I will not give, or that I gave, or that I did not give, that I will sleep, or I did not sleep, that I slept, or that I did not sleep, then I will cast a prohibition into the sea, so that I will not cast, or that I have cast, or that I have not cast. The Mishna says he is liable only for oath taking in the future, and as states in Leviticus, to do bad or to do good. Rabbi Akiva said to him, if so, we know only of things pertaining to doing bad or good, but how do we know the things pertaining to doing by good or bad? He said to him, from the extension of the verse, he said to him, if the verse extended to that regard, the earth verse has extended in this regard. I'm sorry, let me read that again. If the verse extended it in that regard, the verse extended in this regard as well. If one swore to annul a mitzvah and he did not annul it, he is exempt to fulfill the mitzvah and he did not fulfill it, for he is exempt. It might have been inferred that he be liable, as the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda ben Sarah said, Rabbi Yehuda ben Sarah, for an optional matter concurring which was not endured in Mount Sinai, he is liable from a mitzvah concerning that which he endured from Mount Sinai. Is it not certain that he should be liable? They said to him, no. If you say this regards an optional oath, it is because Scripture made his negative equal to positive in that regard. What will you say in the case of an oath he fulfilled to in mitzvah, to which Scripture did not make negative equal to positive, for he was forced to annul. If he swears to annul and he does not annul, he's exempt. I swear that I will not eat this loaf. I swear that I will not eat it. I swear that I will not eat it. And he ate it. He is liable only once. Regarding the oath, this is the oath of utterance for which one is liable for the transmission transgression to a penalty of lashes, and for its inadvertent transgression to a variable sin offering. And with a vain oath, one is liable to the willful transgression to a penalty of lashes. In its inadvertent transgression, one is exempt.
Yeah.
Okay. Didn't get through that last one. Okay. All right, Mr. Shem, I will see. We'll have to figure out what we're going to do at the end in 2 weeks. What we're going to do about Pesach.
Yeah. Invariably, I like to go enjoy my Cholamoid late minion.
I know. And we also have Friday. That Friday of Pesach is going to be a busy day for everybody.
Yeah.
So we'll figure out what when we get a little bit closer.
Yeah, we'll discuss it later. This Friday again, I'm running.
Oh,
so,
where?
So we won't have share on Friday.
Where are you running?